Dawn, another game I'm really excited about is the game that we'll be in attendance for, and that is Michigan at Indiana. Another 3:30 p.m. game on CBS. And really, like I said at the beginning of the show, this could be a playoff clincher for Indiana, which is something I never thought I'd be saying at all in the season going into the year. But that's really what's going on right now, because Indiana, with a win over Michigan, they moved to 10-0 on the year. Their first of all, their best record ever, best start ever. And also, they've never won 10 games in a season before. So the fact that they were 10-0 doing it is unbelievable after going 3-9 last year. And if you look at the remaining schedule, Dolan, they play Ohio State and Purdue. And Purdue might be the worst team in the Big Ten. So it stands to reason that even if you lose to Ohio State, you go 11-1, pretty much any 11-1 Power 4 team is guaranteed a spot in the college football playoff, at least in that large spot. So I think with a win over Michigan this Saturday against the defending champs, Indiana pretty much is guaranteed a spot in the playoff, because I look at that schedule, and as long as they beat Purdue, and obviously that's a little bit of a rivalry game too, so we'll see what happens there, but they beat Purdue, and even if they lose to Ohio State, they're probably going to be in at 11-1. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens on Saturday, and pretty interesting that it's going to be maybe a playoff clincher for Indiana.
Yeah, I mean, you can't, you got to take things one game at a time, and I think people are gonna complain about the strength of schedule, and I get it. Out of conference, they didn't really play anyone in the Big Ten. They played a lot of mid-tier teams in the Big Ten, but they have blown everybody out. And I think they're the one. I'm not usually all in favor of the eye test. It's like, okay, how does the team look? I get it, but the eye test tells you Indiana is one of the best teams in the country. They're really good on offense, they're really good on defense, they're really well coached. We know what Curt Cignetti's doing there. I think this is a big I mean, it's the biggest game in school history this week, and then you got the next biggest game in school history next week against Ohio State. I think I'm with you. 11-1 should get them in, and I get the strength of schedule stuff, but they've beaten every team by 3 scores, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at least, and even last week,
17-point game against Washington, I think it was the closest game all year.
Yeah, I mean, even last week against Michigan State, they fall behind 10-0 early, and then they rattle off 47 unanswered. I mean, they're doing things that, I mean, normal teams don't do. I do think they're one of the best teams in the country, and they just have to go out and really the 2 biggest games of the season and prove it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Dawn, you have the Michigan offense, though, in this one. So what should you be looking out for when they have the ball?
Yeah, I hadn't really done the big deep dive on Indiana's defense yet. I've seen bits and pieces of it. We know a lot of the characters from James Madison are really good, and some other transfers. A guy like C.J. West up front from Kent State. Obviously, D'Angelo Pons is playing great at corner. He was the best player in that Washington game. But I wanted to see, okay, how does this work? What are we doing other than just having really good players, right? And I think it's actually not that complicated a defense. You know what they do? They do the same thing they did at James Madison when Curt Cignetti was there. Over the last 2 years, James Madison had the 8th best run defense grade in the country. Indiana this year has the 6th best run defense grade in the country. And next week, I kind of want Indiana's defense again, because I'll delve into the coverage stuff and what they're going to have to do with Jeremiah Smith and all that.
I don't think it's next week, though. I think
is it the week after?
They have a bye. Yeah,
they have a bye.
Week.
Okay, so when we do that game, I kind of want their defense so I can go over the secondary stuff. There's another part of this. But I'll be honest with you, their front seven is just really darn good. I mean, all those guys that they brought over, you talk about Michael Kamara's having a hell of a season, moving all over the defensive line. C.J. West from Kent State is a really good run stopper. You got guys in there like Zach Carpenter. They're just a big physical defensive line. So as a team, 6th in the nation in run D grade, 3rd best average depth of tackle in the country in run defense, and their defensive line is in the top 10 of that as well. When you talk about it, they're just a really hard team to block. And then you got guys at linebacker like Jalen Walker and Aiden Fisher, who both came from James Madison, and they're really good at filling gaps. I think there are times when you can put extra tight ends on the field and run. You have to run directly at them. I mean, directly at this Indiana front. They make you out physical them, because if you try to turn the corner, you try to run outside zone, try to get outside, you're not getting there. I'm telling you right now, you are not getting there. There are moments this year where, okay, you need to just double team all these guys up front and make these linebackers make plays and just see where it goes and see if you can be the bigger team. Is that what Michigan wants to do? Absolutely, but it ain't going to be easy. I'll tell you that right now. They have big monsters up front, especially on this defensive line. I think, especially the part 2, they're comfortable. When they're always ahead, they're comfortable. Last week, that 10-0 deficit they had against Michigan State, that was the first time they trailed all season. Right? So it's hard for teams to run the ball, and it's hard for teams to run the ball when they're behind in these games so often, and Indiana's racking up points. But I think that's obviously where it starts for Michigan, is no matter who the quarterback is, it's going to be Davis Warren again this week. They're going to mix in Alex Orji. They need to run the football. We know by now that Michigan, to win games, needs to run for 250, 300 yards, right? Michigan's offensive line is going to be put to the test this week. In their 5 wins, their run blocking grade is a 70. And in their 4 losses, their run blocking grade is a 60. It's very simple. If Michigan can be the more physical team, they can win this ball game.
Yeah.
I think that's true in the trenches on both sides of the ball. Indiana's defensive line, though, is, I'm telling you, it's monstrous. This is quietly one of the best units in the country, and they're just so darn physical. You got guys like Kamara and West and these guys up. They can two-gap. They can shed blocks. If you don't, I'll tell you, especially Michael Kamara, if you don't double-team him, good luck.
Yeah.
Just good luck to you. And if you block him with a tight end, you're doing something wrong. This dude's a monster. I think he's a legitimate NFL prospect the way he's playing the run and the pass right now. Indiana, look, it sounds obvious when you're talking about any defense. You got to get through this first line of defense first because they're a serious problem.
Absolutely. So my match to watch on the other side of the ball is about Michigan's coverage unit, because I've had Michigan's defense a lot in our previews this year, and always I've talked about the defensive line and how elite it's been. And it is. It's the highest graded defensive line in the country, like I said before in our Ole Miss preview. But the same cannot be said for their second and even third levels of their defense. Right now, Dawn, the Wolverines linebackers and DBs, you combine them together, they are 66th in PFF grade as a unit, while their 74.6 coverage grade as a team is 90th in college football. And outside of Will Johnson, who, by the way, has missed the last 2 games with an injury, and we don't even know if he'll be playing in this game against Indiana, but outside of him, they lack true difference makers in the back 7 of their defense right now. And the problem is, Indiana has put opposing back 7s in blenders this year. Linebackers, corners, and safeties combined against Indiana have a 48.8 coverage grade and a 58.2 overall grade. And the reason why, Dolan, obviously you mentioned before how like the true equalizer has always been Michigan's defensive line because of how good it is. But it's not like the defensive line dominating against what's been a good offensive line for Indiana, by the way, too. It's not even like them dominating will guarantee success for the Wolverines either, because you look at Curtis Rourke and his splits. He's the only quarterback in America with a 90-plus passing grade when he's kept clean, when he's under pressure, when he's blitzed, and when he's not blitzed. There is no answer for Curtis Rourke right now, it seems like. You have to play better in coverage against them. So, yes, obviously getting him under pressure consistently will probably lead to success for Michigan. So that is a big key to the game. But more so than that, I'm looking at the back 7 of their defense and whether or not they'll also be put into a blender like other teams against Indiana this year, because they really need to step up against an offense that's really just executing at one of the highest levels in college football.
And you just said it right there. Indiana doesn't do a whole lot of complicated stuff. They run the foundational things in their offense at just a crazy high level of execution, right? And Michigan, this is not the same Michigan secondary as last year, right? And we know Will Johnson's great when he's in there and healthy, but you're talking about a team that is not as good at linebacker. They're not as good at safety. Rod Moore was hurt in the preseason.
Lost Keon Sabb,
You lost Keon Sabb. You lost Josh Wallace on the other side. Right. Like pretty much everyone in this back 7 is different except for Will Johnson, right? This is a major problem against an Indiana team that I mentioned a few weeks ago runs RPOs better than anybody, because those RPOs, they make those guys, especially on the inside, those linebackers, they make those guys make decisions. And Curtis Rourke's a veteran quarterback who knows where to go, and he's executing that flawlessly throughout this entire year. And I think the other thing that needs to be said, again, the RPOs and the quick throws and everything that kind of define this Indiana passing game, and they can drop back and throw the ball too. They got a boatload. They got 4 or 5 good receivers. You got 2 good backs in the backfield in Lawton and Ellison. But the book is out on Michigan, okay? You're not going to block them. You're not going to drop back for 3.5 seconds and block them. You're going to get rid of the ball. And you know, I have an update to this number I've been looking at all season. Against Michigan, opposing quarterbacks have a 2.52 average time to throw. 2.52 seconds. That's moving. When you talk about that's a lot of quick throws. Washington beat them with Will Rogers doing that. Luke Altmaier did that for Illinois. I mean, this is the formula.
Dylan Gabriel did it a lot too.
Dylan Gabriel, of course, he's going to do it, right?
And Curtis Rourke can do it too.
Yeah. Well, that's this offense is Curtis Rourke for the most part making quick decisions, right? Especially the holes in the middle of the field against your linebackers and strong safeties and guys dropping down, huge problem.
Yeah.
It's a huge problem when you're playing against Indiana's passing game. Rourke is so decisive. They have so many weapons on the outside. Even their screen game is really good on the outside. I think it's a major challenge for Michigan's secondary. I'm with you. Obviously, they want their defensive line to dominate the game, but I think matchup-wise, this is a problem. I think Indiana matchup-wise in their passing game is a problem against anybody, especially with the way that they're executing every single week.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Dolan, in the game that we'll be in attendance for, and what you describe is the biggest game in Indiana history, will Indiana all but clinch a spot in the college football playoff with a win over the defending national champs, or will Michigan pull off a big upset?
I think Indiana is one of the elite teams in the country. I really do. When you're talking about those top 12, I do think they're one of them. I think they will have a chance to prove where they stand within that top 12 next 2 weeks from now. Sorry, against Ohio State. They get a bye week. They'll get a chance to prove where in that standing they are. But right now, I just think Indiana's a better team than Michigan. I think Michigan, they've lost a lot of the early momentum that they had with their defense in the run game. They've lost 3 of the last 4. Michigan's path to victory here is so narrow. It's so narrow. It's like, and I think the book is out. Get rid of the football before Mason Graham and those guys can kill you, and just don't screw it up on offense. Yeah. Don't turn the ball over. Don't give them short fields. I know Davis Warren, a couple weeks ago he threw for 120 yards, and that was like their best passing game of the season. I mean, I don't think Michigan has enough unless they play absolutely perfect games, like in their fashion, like they did earlier in the year against USC, against Minnesota. Look, this is a team, Michigan, that beat Michigan State by a touchdown. Indiana just beat them 47-10. I mean, I think we're talking about 2 different calibers of football. Michigan's defense or D-line will put up a fight, but I don't think too much. I got Indiana 31-17.
Yeah, I got Indiana as well in this one. I got them winning 33-17, so a little bit more of a margin than you. But
you got a safety for them? Is that what you got going?
Yeah,
pick up safety on defense?
I just think Indiana, man, they just have been executing such a high level offensively and defensively this year. It's just hard to pick against them, honestly, almost against any team in college football, but especially against a offense in Michigan that has not been executing at a very high level. So I think Indiana win 10 games for the first time ever and all but secure a spot in the college football playoff, which will cement themselves as one of the great comeback stories in college football. And Curt Cignetti as probably the coach of the year for going 3-9 last year, and then this year in his first year there, bringing them to probably the college football playoff. That is just an insane turnaround for that program. So Indiana, I have winning that one 33-17. Hey, thanks for watching another episode of the PFF College Football Show. Please make sure you guys subscribe to the channel.
Also, subscribe to PFF Plus at subscribe.pff.com for all of the same data and grades that we use in our show, plus fantasy tools, betting tools, and our mock draft simulator.